A very warm welcome to the many participants, and I see that many more are coming in, but I guess we can start still. Thank you to all the speakers for being with us here. Thank you, Isabelle, for all your work on making this happening. Isabelle Thoman is working at the IAU and facilitates all the work on sustainable development. I'm very, very pleased to have this joint webinar today, a webinar together with HETL and the IAU. And we will be talking about what higher education leadership can actually do to ensure that we can hope for a more sustainable future, and hopefully a not too far a future. At the same time, there are many challenges around us everywhere, and not the least in countries that are facing incredible difficulties, if not war. And so sustainable development will also be part of that recovery, hopefully in not too far a future. So towards a more sustainable future, we hope for the many. What can higher education leadership do to get there? 2022, as you all know, is a critical year for higher education and also for Agenda 2030, including the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We're less than 10 years away from the deadline set for the agenda, and much remains to be done. And each and every time we also see that there are new challenges coming up that impact the capacity of universities to deliver on their promise. And so that's what we will hear more about today. With the world facing various crises, bringing a multitude of challenges and opportunities, universities have a leading role to play in the global endeavor to implement the SDGs and to respond to the overall goals set in the agenda. It is through education, through research, through campus initiatives, campus activities, and campus engagement activities, campaigns for a local, a national, regional, and global level change and transformation that universities can ensure a more healthy, green, fairer, more inclusive society. And the role of the higher education leadership is of great importance there. We have, with the IAU, developed one of the previous or the last issues of the magazine IAU Horizons. We've devoted it to leadership for a sustainable future, higher education in Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. And we were very pleased to be able to publish 34 very diverse and innovative contributions from 25 countries to demonstrate this crucial role of the academic leadership in mainstreaming sustainable development. And so we've invited some of the authors to be with us here today and to develop on the thoughts that they shared in writing. And we will put the link to the magazine again in the chat and send it around after the session as well. So this session is recorded, we hope you will agree, and the recording itself will be made available at the end, or not right after the session, but in the days to come. And we will send a follow-up mail also with possibly the presentations that the speakers will share if they have any that they would wish to share. We can also in that follow-up mail share some further links to information, documents, elements that you would wish to use to engage with sustainable development at your universities from around the world. So I'm very pleased to now give the floor to the moderator, Enakshi Sengupta. I'm very much pleased to welcome you to this session here with us today. You're the HETL Vice President, you're the Chair of the Business Department as well of the American University of Afghanistan, and you may say a few words about that. I'm very pleased to give you the floor to welcome the excellent speakers we have with us today for this special webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Olivier. You have already introduced me. I am working as the Vice President for HETL, Higher Education Teaching and Learning Organization, which was started by Dr. Patrick Blessinger way back in 2010, I guess. I started working with him from 2011. We have various initiatives. We have launched a new magazine called the Frontier Magazine. We have a journal with Emerald Publishing, Journal of Applied Research in Higher Education. And we have a book series with Emerald Publishing, and we have published, I think, around 34 book volumes. And we have an upcoming conference in Istanbul in September. And I'm sure many of you, or maybe most of you, will join us over there. Higher Education Teaching and Learning, or HETL as we call it, is dedicated to promote and enhance education, and sustainable development of education is one of our key goals. I also wear another hat. I'm the chair of business department at American University of Afghanistan and director for Center for Teaching and Learning. Of course, our campus has fallen and it is under the control of Taliban now. So we are in exile, and I'm hoping that we very shortly will be regrouped. I think in Doha, if I'm not mistaken, but most of our students are evacuated and they are in Iraq and in Bishkek, American University of Central Asia and American University of Iraq, Soleimani. We have laid emphasis on evacuating our women students and then also our faculty and staff members. So without much ado, let me invite and welcome the most esteemed panel. We have Professor Abhilasha Singh, Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs at the American University of Emirates, Dubai. We have Professor He Lianzhen, Vice President, Zhejiang University, China. We have Professor Stacey Richard Kennedy, Pro Vice Chancellor, Global Affairs, the University of West Indies. And we have Professor Ronald Zarzeski, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly, Vice Rector for Academic Research, Collegium Civitas, Poland. And I would request Professor Abhilasha Singh, if you could start your presentation, and if you would like to talk or share your screen, the floor is yours.
First of all, at the outset, as a member of HETL, Higher Education Teaching and Learning Organization, and as Country Director of United Arab Emirates, I heartily welcome all attendees. This is the first joint IAU and HETL webinar series, and it is my immense pleasure to be joined by such esteemed co-panelists on a topic that is much needed to discuss towards a more sustainable future. What can higher education leadership do to get there? And thank you, Inakshi, for a brilliant introduction. The way you were explaining what has happened and in the higher education institution because of the recent political issues, we have to emphasize on sustainability. One thing I'm sure all of you will agree that universities are at the heart of the world's most demanding challenges, and Inakshi has just mentioned that. If we go last 2 years, we have demonstrated the critical role of universities in tackling challenges like climate issues, terrorism, pandemic issues, societal problems. In addition, some of my colleagues, they come and they tell me that pandemic, it exposed the university preparedness. Universities were not prepared to deal with the pandemic issue. I strongly believe it helped the community to appreciate universities' contribution to the world's sustainable development. And in the recent years, this has received significant attention. I was noticing that the ranking organizations, like whether it is Times Higher Education, whether it is QS, but they are including now sustainability as one of the important key KPI, the key performing indicator in the ranking. So I'm certain we all will agree that higher education institutions, HEIs, we all play a very important role in promoting sustainable development. The SDGs, which are the part of the UN Agenda 2030, can drive any institution's strategy towards sustainability. But the issue here is that it has to be incorporated by institutional leaders to ensure both parts, formulating the strategy and implementing the sustainable development policies and the related initiatives which are there in any institutions, the action plan which are there. And it was very interesting and fascinating for me when I was reading the In Focus, the recent issue of IAU Horizon on leadership for a sustainable future, because it witnessed the contribution of not only Higher Education Teaching and Learning Organization, HETL, but many examples of higher education institutions around the world, and that is so much relevant and important to discuss. So I just feel like HEIs are expected to act as sustainable leaders, as change actors, We always say, be the change you want to see in others, especially considering the needs of present and future generation. And we are expected to encourage professionals that are proficient and aware of SDGs as well. Many times in many discussion with many people, I feel like people are not even aware of SDGs. So this implies that in higher education institution, there is a need for the whole university system, and it should become, it should orient, I mean, it is required to educate students that will be capable of leading different types of organizations in future in a very responsible way towards sustainable societal forms. So the world definitely requires very effective higher education leadership for sustainable development. But first, the leader himself or herself, I mean, we are leading higher education institution. I have been in the higher education sector for the last 30 years, and I've been in the leadership position for so long. I just think that the first thing which is required is to have an understanding, to take an introspective journey, to have an understanding of self, and at the same time to have a relational view of the world so that we can understand what is required to make the change. So the reflection is important. And the reflection is basically here to understand your own knowledge about the sustainability in context of society, in context of the different communities we are in. So this is the process which probably many of the higher education institutions, I don't think everyone is emphasizing in the same way. And it is much needed to discuss, because if we want to achieve the SDGs, and as in the introductory address it was mentioned, we are just less than 10 years away. The leadership at both the national level, at the organizational level, it must have a kind of shared responsibility so that we can attain the goal. It's a long-term goal, but it needs persistence. It needs to be integrated in any of the institutional strategies. We have a lot of researchers in this regard. It is well cited that there are challenges in implementing it. And the challenges can range from a simple lack of interest by any university administration to a lack of collective effort, to lack of integrating this in the institutional action plans, the strategies. So there are challenges, but we all are here to discuss the best practices. What can we do so that we can potentially lead to the improvement in economic efficiency, in social cohesion, in environmental responsibilities, which are basic indicators of sustainable development. I think, Inakshi, I would be brief here. This is just the introductory statement, and I would like to hear from others. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Abhilasha. I fully agree with you. We are the ones who should be the change makers. If we want to see change, we have to usher it ourselves. Thank you so much for your wonderful thoughts. Professor Lianzen, would you like to present your thoughts or share the screen, whichever way you would like to?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be invited to the webinar and meet you all virtually. The outbreak of COVID-19 has gravely affected international travel, but we always feel so grateful that technologies enable us to meet one way or another. I'm happy to be part of today's meaningful conversation. Zhejiang University recognizes that the higher education community can play a key role in addressing global challenges and advancing the process of sustainable development. As part of our commitment to enhance the engagement with UN's Sustainable Development Goals and accelerate implementation efforts, we launched a university-wide sustainability action plan. We call it a Global ZGU for Social Good, shortened as Z4G, in 2021. The plan integrates sustainability into education, scholarship, and campus operations, in which 60,000 plus students, 9,600 plus staff, and 200 plus overseas partners and the local communities where we are based will play different but equally important roles. To implement our sustainability initiative, we set up task-oriented working groups with 20 administrative units and 40 colleges across the university to facilitate strong collaboration with cohesiveness and coherence. We are making concerted effort to drive changes on the ground. The university has therefore embedded sustainability competence throughout its curricula and activities to nurture global citizens with social responsibilities. Around 1,000 courses and outdoor activities are offered. A vivid example is our unique biodiversity course called Open Air Museum of Mushrooms, which enables students to fully immerse themselves in nature to gain the know-how of species conservation. Becoming aware of the impact of our choices in daily life, we are adopting a more sustainable lifestyle. Bicycle sharing has become a popular travel option on campus. Students are actively engaged in the Zero Food Waste Initiative and the Recycling Right Action, which help minimize waste across the campus and enhance the awareness of turning waste into treasure. Being a very comprehensive university, Zhejiang University encourages multidisciplinary research to find more sustainable solutions spanning a wide range of spheres like carbon neutrality, climate change, health and well-being, and smart cities, etc. Some researchers have been devoted to accelerating innovation in clean energy and mitigating climate change in the past decade. Contributing over 10,000 articles in net zero research, we rank the 6th globally by scholarly output in 2021 Elsevier Analytical Report. For example, Professor Gu Baojing from the College of Environmental and Resource Sciences with his team discovered a more cost-effective approach to mitigate PM 2.5 air pollution through controlling nitrogen emissions, which brings a more affordable solution to environmental protection. As a living laboratory, Zhejiang University has also set up a special office to oversee green campus operations and launched an all-encompassing program to save water and reduce carbon emissions. A particular highlight is our international campus, the first college campus in China, which has won a Platinum Award for its leading sustainability operations and management capacity. On the campus, rainwater is collected for storage in the Central Lake to be filtered and used for campus irrigation. It is estimated that 15% of water resources are conserved and utilized every year. The carbon emission per unit building area has dropped around 37% since 2018. And the direct greenhouse gas emissions have continued to decrease for 3 consecutive years. Like your universities, Zhejiang University firmly upholds sustainable development and seeks to make the world a better place while pursuing innovation and excellence. When implementing the Z4G action plan, we do it together with our partners, learn from each other, and make mutual progress. Taking this opportunity, I'm happy to share that so far, we are privileged to join forces with 60 peer universities from 31 countries and regions to make a joint statement on the 2030 agenda. Announced at the Global University Presidents Forum organized by ZGU with the support from IAU last March, this statement is to express our collective commitment to the SDGs. We also hope it will be a strong call for action to the global higher education community and beyond. And we are pleased to invite more universities to join us in this effort. Well, this is the end of my presentation. I look forward to listening to the other speakers during this live discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor. This was so impressive. I think this is what we can call WIA, a whole institutional approach. And I'm sure many of us would like to partner or even visit your university. It's so fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Thank
Professor
you.
Stacy Kennedy, would you like to start your presentation?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone. And on behalf of the University of the West Indies, I extend sincere thanks to the organizers for your kind invitation to participate in today's webinar. The University of the West Indies was pleased to have an article published in the last edition of Horizons magazine, which focused on how, as an activist university in the Global South, we have been contributing to building a more sustainable future for the Caribbean. My presentation today will provide a brief overview of the key points of that article. Firstly, allow me to situate our university. The University of the West Indies is a comprehensive public university with roughly 50,000 students and over 5,000 staff members. It is a regional university that was established 74 years ago to serve multiple independent territories in the Caribbean. We have 5 campuses based in Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Antigua and Barbuda, Jamaica, and an open campus that is dedicated to online education. We are also an SDG engaged university and therefore have a firm commitment to promoting sustainable development in the Caribbean. This is embedded in our mission and vision, and at the core of our operations are 3 strategic pillars to enhance access, alignment, and agility through our teaching, research, advocacy, and partnerships. And all of this in support of revitalizing Caribbean development. In terms of our activism as the Caribbean's regional university and a leading university on development issues affecting the Global South more widely, we are promoting the engagement of the SDGs and consider it our duty to put a spotlight specifically on issues that, 1, reflect the challenges faced by small island developing states, SIDS, particularly those in the Caribbean region, which for decades has been a region of high death and low growth, and is being seen more and more as the region that is on the front line of the climate crisis. 2, issues that highlight the multiple vulnerabilities of island states because of the very nature of the effects of global warming. 3, increased consciousness on reparatory justice and social justice issues that continue to affect the development potential of post-colonial societies. And 4, to ensure that we leverage scientific knowledge and maximize opportunities presented through our global partnerships to advance the SDGs. Of course, as a higher education institution, our core contribution to building a more sustainable future is through our teaching and research. In 2018, we were very proud to have been nominated by the IAU to lead on SDG 13 climate action within the global cluster on higher education and research for sustainable development. And using SDG 13 as an example of how we mainstream the SDGs in our teaching, we have several taught programs across 7 faculties that focus on sustainable development, marine ecosystems, biodiversity and conservation, marine sciences, coastal engineering, etc., just to give you a few examples. And all of these with a specific focus on the considerations and vulnerabilities of small island developing states. In the area of research, we have several research clusters and research centers and institutes that are focused on sustainable development and climate change issues. Many of these are well known internationally, such as our Center for Resource Management and Environmental Studies, CIRMES, which is based at our Cavel campus in Barbados, the Climate Studies Group based at our Mona campus in Jamaica, our Sir Arthur Lewis Institute, which is named after, of course, our Nobel laureate from St. Lucia. And we have several academic staff who have contributed or are contributing to the IPCC assessment reports. And so we continue to make contributions to the scholarly outputs and the science behind climate change issues and all of the issues linked to biodiversity and ecosystem management, particularly for SIDS in the Caribbean. Permit me also to mention the final bullet here on the slide, just to put a spotlight on our Global Institute for Climate Smart and Resilient Development, which is a virtual hub that was launched last year, dedicated to harnessing all UWI expertise across our 5 campuses on climate change, sustainable development, resilience, and disaster risk reduction, again, highlighting the interconnectedness of these issues and the need for multidisciplinary research across our different faculties and centers. At the UWI, we are acutely aware that in order to achieve a more sustainable future, knowledge must inform policy and practice. Thus, increased emphasis is being placed on research application and sustainability practices across our campuses. After all, universities are themselves living laboratories and spaces where sustainability projects can be piloted and can have important demonstration effects. This slide highlights a couple examples of projects led by our campuses. The Caribbean's first net zero building at our Mona campus in Jamaica, the application of advanced water capture technology using source hydro panels in the University Hospital in Jamaica, the installation of electric vehicle charging stations at our UWI campuses, etc. And then finally, as a relatively young, small developmental university in the Caribbean, under the leadership of our Vice Chancellor, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, we have pursued a robust global engagement strategy to build strategic alliances and partnerships that will allow for greater global advocacy on the SDGs, as well as increased internationalization opportunities and impact of our teaching and research collaborations. So mindful of the time allocation, I will end with this slide, which shows the network of our UWI global centers and institutes, through which we are able to amplify the reach and impact of our work on the SDGs. And in summary, what the UWI has been doing to advance and mainstream the SDGs is really placing a focus on what we do in teaching, research, sustainability practices, advocacy, and partnerships, and bringing that all together so that we can really harness the best of our UWI and put this in the service of sustainable development. So with that, I'd like to conclude my presentation and to thank you for the generosity of your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Stacey. This was very impressive, and I really like the way you said very small effort. If this is small effort, I don't know what is big effort. I mean, I have a lot of my colleagues who has joined the panel today, and this is going to give us some food for thought for our university too. Thank you so much. We are really enlightened. We have Professor Barnabas Nawangi, from Professor and Vice Chancellor Makerere University, Uganda, who has joined us. And we will shortly be with you. Before that, Professor Ronald, from Vice Rector and Academic Research from Poland. The floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you so much. And first of all, thank you for the invitation to participate in this panel. I'm also really impressed by the small projects and efforts that were mentioned by my co-panelists. I really liked it. In my little presentation, I would like to somehow refer to the little paper that I published, that was published in the IAU magazine, and where I try to somehow deal with or tackle the issue of honesty and fantasies, reality, regarding our approach, our attitudes towards implementation of the SDGs and sustainable development in general. And yeah, starting sharing my main thought I would like to mention first maybe that if we look at the SDG indicators in the current year 2022, we see that actually many of them are far from being met. And also, if we read the reports, for example, one of the reports published by the experts of UN last year, we see that during that these indicators haven't been in very well shape and well conditioned even before the pandemics. But during the pandemics, the situation deteriorated even further, and somehow we should be worried about this. And now the question is, the question that arises in this context is why it happens. If we set these goals, if we declare that we are really devoted, that we really treat them seriously, that we try to put a lot of effort to implement them, to meet these goals in 2030, why we cannot meet them, even though many of us have the feeling that it's manageable. But still, even though we feel like it's manageable, we are far from reaching these goals. So the question that I would like to ask is if that should mean that we don't care enough. And recently in Poland, for example, in my country, some surveys among the citizens kind of investigating what are the popular attitudes regarding SDGs and sustainable development. These type of surveys or investigations became pretty fashionable. And according to all these, the surveys, the results, questionnaires, etc., that I studied, I found out that that people really care. I mean, some of us, people, citizens in Poland, citizens of my country, people are really afraid of what's happening in the world. People are sad. People are terrified with the deteriorating conditions, environmental conditions, etc. And also, when people are asked if you do anything about that in practice in your common day life, people say and declare that yes, we do something. And specifically, people, for example, declare that they save the water. This is one of the top answers given. Then they save the electricity. Also, they declare something pretty strange. I would say that they don't accumulate stuff, which is not necessary. So they perceive it as an attempt to care for the environment, and so on and so on. So the next question is if this is enough to save the electricity, to save the water. And if you look at the very in-depth analysis and studies of many experts all around the world, UN experts, you will easily notice that it's not enough, that it's far from being enough, and that we should put a lot more effort to even be able to somehow give ourselves a chance to meet the Sustainable Development Goals in 2030, for example. Also, if you look at if you analyze the behavior of the big companies, for example, or business, or what they declare as the corporate social responsibility, still these programs are very selective. They somehow address very specific aspects or elements of the general SDG agenda, and thus they're also not satisfactory. They are not they are not enough. And unfortunately, many years ago, we already passed this threshold where the small steps could have saved the world. Nowadays, we should do much more. So now another question that you find in these questionnaires of people's attitudes is if you are ready to do more, and some really advanced actions are then presented or offered to the interviewees. And then people say, no, we are not ready to do this. So for example, if people are asked, are you ready to completely stop flying? with airplanes, or if you're ready to, for example, become vegetarian, if you're not one already, then people are not very comfortable with this type of declarations. And they say, no, no, that goes too far. Or maybe they say, no, I'm already doing enough. I cannot do more. I have other duties in my life. I have other things to do. This is too much. Or maybe others can do this. Or people also say that I don't know enough about this to declare anything about that. And this brings us to the point where we feel like people would like to do something, but when it comes to practice, they are not ready to do it, and they expect others to do that. And what are these others? Typically, people mention two entities. One of them, these are the governments, and the other is the big corporations like international companies, etc. So people expect these bodies, these international corporations or governments, to take the responsibility for the condition of the world, let's say. And somehow this leads us to a very peculiar situation where these companies and these governments produce something that we treat as greenwashing. So somehow they try to greenwash us and to present themselves as providing or launching this type of actions that we expect them to launch, even though they are not doing that, or at least not to the extent that is necessary. But in the end, at the end of the day, this is we who somehow desire to be greenwashed, because we prefer to live in a world where we can feel like there are these governments, there are these big companies that are responsible for all that, and they will do their job and they will save the planet. And so not that big share of this responsibility is at our side. There is also one experience, a very specific experience, which is the COVID-19 pandemics, which somehow proved that a lot can be done in practice, actually, because the scale of the efforts and the scale of the investment to stop the pandemics of coronavirus showed actually how much this world can do if something is considered really important. And I would hazard a guess, and this is based somehow on my, let's say, rough calculations, that we put a lot less effort to implement sustainable development goals than we put to stop the coronavirus pandemics, both in terms of finances and in terms of, let's say, involvement. And what it means for the universities and for what it means in terms of leaders. I would say that for us as higher education institutions, it means that it's not that much about knowledge. It's more about forging attitudes. And this is our, I would say, main task in these circumstances. So in other words, it's also not about providing proofs. It's about acting, showing people how to act. It is not about declarations or manifestos anymore, maybe, because there are enough of them. It is about a genuine ethos. And I would say, especially in these circumstances of disinformation, of fake news that we all know these days, we should be leaders, I would say, leaders in honesty, and maybe also leaders in truth, leaders in action, showing that what we do here as universities, let's say, these are not only promises, these are not only declarations, this is like true commitment, and this is an academic ethos that is meant both in this, let's say, sphere of ideas, but also in the sphere of actions, like effective actions to save the planet. I would say, I would use this big words, let's say, and especially in this context of implementing and reaching the goals, the sustainable development goals. So that's my simple thought that I wanted to share with you, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Roland. With the note, is greenwashing and becoming vegetarian enough? I request Professor Barnabas to please present your views, and if you would like to share the screen or talk to us about your take on sustainable development.
Thank you very much. and sorry for joining rather late. I will just share a few ideas basing on our own experiences at Makerere University, where I am. And I think the big question that faces the SDGs is, are they sustainable with the 2-year interruption caused by COVID-19? And I believe that not only did the COVID-19 delay the attainment of the SDGs, in many cases, it pushed several countries back. So the countries will be not talking about the remaining 8 years, but maybe they have been pushed back 15 years from whatever they had already achieved. So that is a big question. And therefore, what can we as universities in this part of the world in Africa do to contribute to alleviating that problem? So I want to say that probably when COVID eventually goes completely, we will be talking about the post-COVID era, because things will have completely changed. The way we live will have changed, and the way we do things will have changed. COVID-19 particularly affected the education sector in Africa quite adversely, including the higher education sector. And a lot of things will not be done the same. But the good thing it has done is to awaken us to the reality, and that, you know, we must not do things the way we have always done them. We must change the way we do things. We must revise our curricula, so that we have been talking about issues of revising the curricula for years, but not doing it. But now the harsh reality is here with us. And we realize we must actually now address the issue of curricula. What are we teaching our children? What are they able to contribute to the achievement of these SDGs? Do they understand what sustainable development is? And so those are becoming very big issues now at universities. And so what do we do? Some of the things that have drastically changed is, for example, moving to online teaching. And you know, in Africa, people are all complaining, you know, we do not have the technology, we do not have the services. But then COVID was facing us and saying, so what are you going to do? Are you going to remain there complaining, or are you going to do something about it? And so universities were forced to move on and change and introduce the online teaching and other methods of blended learning, because otherwise nobody knew how long COVID was going to take place. And I think even up to now, we don't know, because now when you hear of Shanghai being shut up completely, we are not quite sure that COVID is gone. It also pointed to one thing, that we institutions in the South must collaborate more closely with each other. Because for historical reasons, the universities in Africa were hugely disadvantaged with very limited investments in the universities by the governments. And therefore, there are few universities which have got some resources, and a lot of the other universities actually don't have those resources. The only way they are going to survive is to collaborate, so that we share the little resources that are available on the continent. So establishing networks like the ARUA, which is the African Research Universities Alliance, is really the way to go. Of course, collaborating with the other universities and being members of the other networks, which help us to know what other people are doing and what could we gain from that by sending our people there, the students or our staff, and also receiving those where we think we have got some advantage, sharing the resources. The questions, as I said, which we shall be asking, can we really attain the SDGs by 2030 after what has happened to all of us during the last 2 years. Are we going to revisit this question? Is anybody making an assessment on what damage COVID has done to the programs of achieving the SDGs by 2030? The other things that we are now looking at more critically is community engagement and bringing the communities more into what we do at the university, learning from the community and also taking knowledge to the communities. If you want, using shortcuts to take knowledge to the communities and learning from the communities. And so we are doing much more of that with the students and also with the faculty. I already mentioned the curriculum review. Is our curricula still valid or must we change? And we realized increasingly that we must almost overhaul our curricula because we must sort of leapfrog into the next century where everybody has left us behind. And as a strategy for us at Makerere, we have come up with a new strategy of doing more research, making our university more research-led. And that is the trend that I see on the African continent. The more traditional universities becoming more research-led. So because we realize that it is only through research that there will be innovations that will be able to solve the enormous problems and challenges that face us as a continent and to which the academia must contribute. And these challenges include climate change. And climate change affects a lot of other things. The demographic changes, the explosion of the population in Africa is a big challenge. So issues of food security and ensuring that people are fed is important. Emerging diseases. We are now beginning to talk of lifestyle diseases, which was not something we were grappling with. So this and its effect on the already fragile economies is something we must address and beginning to research into this. And then, of course, the question of peace and conflict, because this has been a zone of the world where conflicts have persisted, which cannot allow the attainment of SDGs. Because if you build a bridge today and the following day it is destroyed, then you are thrown back a lot. And of course, that leads to the problem of refugees. Uganda is a big recipient of refugees. How do you plan? You have planned for a certain population, but you find that that population has got an increment of 20% overnight because people are fleeing from another country coming into your country. And those are issues that we have to grapple with to see, can we also address these questions of peace and conflict resolution? To enable us to do a lot of this, we have set up centers, research centers, specialized centers. So we have got a center on human rights and peace. We've got a center on what we call International Institute for Global Health, which we are doing together with the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, and also the Environment for Development, addressing the issues of climate change and how we address that in order to address the issue of economic development. So yes, the challenges are enormous, but we have woken up to the reality and we are determined to face them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Barnabas. Yes, there are challenges and we have woken up, and collaborative approach is the way to go. I have a few questions that I'm going to ask the panelists. May I begin with Professor Abhilasha? To what extent are Agenda 2030 and SDG used in your institution, mission and strategic plans? Would you like to address that?
Thank you, Inakshi, for that question. And I just think that it's a wonderful platform to share the best practices and, of course, sharing the challenges. So I'm sure that together and with all if we collaborate with each other, we can definitely meet the SDG goals. So if I look at the universities, yes, we all have a critical role to play in achieving the SDGs, but also in promoting them, like what we are doing within our sphere of influence. Our responsibility and leadership in education, research, innovation is basically to help the community so that we can address the challenges which the community is facing as well. So as university, we particularly focus on SDG 4, which is ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education, and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all, as most of its targets are directly linked with learning and teaching. But it doesn't mean that we are not focusing on other goals, other SDGs. We take a very integrative perspective that covers all the SDGs in implementing their activities and in promoting social awareness, especially our students, because their role in achieving the SDGs and acquiring the skills and the mindset, I strongly believe the mindset, it is really required to contribute to the SDG. It's critical. So when we talk about the whole institution approach, what we do basically that we started with the governance. So the first thing which we did was to incorporate SDG in one of our institutional goal and our objectives. Then we started with the actions, institutional action, which was related to capacity building. So we started creating more awareness about sustainability. We incorporated because the strategic goals, it cascades down. So it goes to each and every unit. So after the capacity building, the research was integrated, joint collaborations were focused, more and more joint collaborations, facilities, of course, and then we moved to the curriculum and assessment. So each unit has to basically do certain activities which are linked with the institutional goal of SDG. So that was important. So for students, for example, we started at a course level, we started having a course on sustainability, which is a mandatory course. It's a general education course, mandatory for all programs. So we currently have 22 programs, out of which our 12 are undergraduate programs with 22 specialization. It is mandated by students to take a course on sustainability. So awareness-wise, that was important. Then we went to to have a more and more many events and competitions on sustainability projects, and this was done through our innovation lab. We incorporated some of the DEI initiatives, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Then we have a college which is called College of Security and Global Studies. And this is the college where there are specializations which are directly related to sustainability. So they focus a lot on crisis management, risk management, emergency management. And in research part, the faculty who are doing researches in sustainability, and they are collaborating as well, they are awarded for their research. So that was also something which was very interesting. We contributed a lot to the local community as well. So whenever such events are there, we participate. I'm happy that the previous speaker, he mentioned about conflict and peace and conflict resolution. So we collaborated with US Institute of Peace and the one in Istanbul, and we are in process of establishing Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution. So we instill in our graduates with a well-rounded education and global awareness, which is required. And we focus on the SDG framework models, which is a systems approach for examining global and local challenges, which is really helping the students to understand how to address the issues which they are passionate about.
Thank you so much. There are a lot of questions which are there in the Q&A box, and I am reading them out. Panelists, you can choose to answer. From Brian Alexander, how can universities around the world address the climate emergency? Who would like to answer that? Don't want to put anybody on the spot.
I can come in on that one because within the global cluster, UWI has been leading on SDG 13, so climate action. And so what that has done is really given us an impetus both within our university as a regional university to bring all of the efforts of our climate researchers across our campuses together so that we are informed of what each other is doing and we can help to generate new ideas, promote research collaborations internally, but then at the same time use that and leverage that information and those collaborations to feed into the work program of the Global University Consortium on SDG 13, which we have set up through the IAU with other satellite universities from across the globe. And so it really has provided an excellent platform, both for internal consolidation of what we're doing as an institution on advancing the climate agenda, but then taking that and sharing it with colleagues and with other universities, learning from each other, co-creating research projects and other initiatives together, and working with the leads from related SDGs. So SDG 14, life below water, SDG 15, life on land, and having different types of collaborations so that together the university community can achieve greater action and so more coordinated action and greater impact across the communities that we serve.
Thank you. Abhilasha, on your note of conflict and peace studies, there is a question from an anonymous attendee. What are the roles of higher education in fighting against dictatorship like Myanmar military in Myanmar? I'm not reading out the entire thing, but some of the questions are, what are the roles of universities in giving hope to the country? What are the roles of international universities to sustain education for the people who are like Myanmar? Thank you. And I think this applies to us in Afghanistan too. Anybody would like to take that question, please?
There's food downstairs.
Thank you, Inakshi, for that question. One thing which I would like to mention to all the attendees here, that the role of higher education cannot be underestimated. So whether it is related to bringing peace, whether it is related to, and the best example is basically when your institution suffered, you collaborated with other institutions to evacuate the students. So this is basically one of the best example to show that how the institution should collaborate with each other, right? If the higher education institutions are not collaborating with each other, probably we will not be able to address the challenges. So the right from the, if we are looking for the leadership here, especially, leadership should thus be understood as a very inclusive, collaborative, and a very reflective process, which is rooted deeply in values and ethics. So whether it is Myanmar issue, whether it is the recent issue of Afghanistan, whether it is any other issue, but yes, what we have to do is collaboration. Collaboration is the key. So I strongly believe that I know that the world is facing with a multitude of challenges, right? But universities have a leading role to play here, whether it is related to joint research, whether it is campus initiatives, whether it is campaign, but we can basically come together to make a very healthier, greener, I can say more inclusive society.
Thank you. There is a question for Professor Barnabas. Would it be a good idea to incorporate the SDG all the way through the general education curriculum of African education? I feel the awareness issue about SDG is not a problem in developed world context. Professor Barnabas, would you like to address that?
I think it is not only necessary, it is absolutely necessary, because the mindset of the children must be geared towards ensuring that first of all, that the environment in which they live is sustained, and that everything they do should ensure that even those who come after them actually enjoy the same life or even better. It is a bit difficult to tell people who are already grown up and they think they have some rights to whatever they are doing to change their mindset. But if this is done from the very beginning, when the children is still young, first of all, it takes them a much shorter time to understand things, much faster than adults. And I must say that in a way, in the curricula of primary and secondary schools here in Uganda, that is being done, although it is not being done to directly to tell the children that this is about SDGs, but they are told this is the way the planet is. This is, if you do this, certain things will die, and then we will not have this or the other one. So they are taught all those things. to ensure that they understand that we really need to have sustained development. So my answer to that is a very strong affirmative that yes, it is absolutely necessary. And for us here in this region, it is not, it is something that cannot be debated, because all studies show that we are the worst affected by climate change. That is aggravated by high population growth. It is also aggravated by conflict. So there is no short answer to that, but say yes, we must address that right from the beginning.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Lianzhen, a question from you, perhaps, from Dr. Amuda Pubalan. If HEs are committed to incorporating SDGs in our courses, how we teach students, that is, how do we provide the opportunity across the course? For some courses, it is easy to do. For example, I can do that in public health, but how can we do this in some other courses such as health data science or engineering? Are mandatory courses in SDG the only way? Any advice from the panelists? And this question.
Okay, thank you. Well, so here at our university, as I may have mentioned, we have offered a number of courses, and these courses are not mandatory, first of all. And then actually students are actively involved. And there are more students who want to sign up for the courses than we can actually offer. So we are trying to, encourage more professors to offer courses along that line. So this is not really difficult because the students are actually getting more and more aware of the SDGs. And also during the summer this year, we are offering a summer program where universities across different continents will join us also for this summer program focusing on SDGs. Yeah, so this has become a part of the curricula, but as I said, this is not mandatory.
Thank you. Professor Ronald, there's a question from Marcia. How can we encourage faculty to take relevant professional development events regarding sustainability? Your thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, this is difficult, and this is in general. I would once again I would refer to the feeling the responsibility for what is happening and feeling for the responsibility for implementing SDGs and for the sustainable development, and who should do what. I would say that, for example, we as the academic environment are maybe too shy or maybe sometimes too politically correct, and we do not express strongly enough our positions in context of various global situations. Like, for example, in our case in Poland today, this is about the situation in the Ukraine happening behind our border, and I would say that academics or researchers, scientists still have a lot of respect among regular citizens. In all the polls or surveys, they are considered highly respected and trustful, reliable. So we could, in this sense, we could do more. And also in terms of discussing things with our politicians or somehow ensuring them or supporting them in their decisions or suggesting some decisions would be helpful. And I very often observe that we are somehow closed in our universities, in our buildings, in our let's say ivory towers, as some call it. And this is something that could be changed. And when trying to convince, for example, our colleagues to do more, I think this is about this ethos, and this is about this convincing people that the responsibility is ours. It's not of these big companies, as I mentioned, or not as big as the governments, as mentioned, even though people feel like this, and even this is the result of the surveys, but it is ours. This is pretty obvious, but we vote for these politicians. We also somehow buy these products, and in this way we vote for the companies. And once again, this is not about that much about knowledge or about sharing the results of our research, because this is pretty straightforward. this is more about, I would say, I would argue that this is more about showing an appropriate action, and we should start with us, so with the faculty staff, with our colleagues. And yeah, this is about talking. There is one theory that I could refer, maybe that I would refer to. I don't know if you know the theory of the politics of small things, somehow formulated by Professor Goldfarb from New York, from the New School. And he says that the most important actions are born around our kitchen tables, where we speak with those who are the most important people for us, with our friends, with our families. And in this way, we somehow impact and create attitudes of our closest circle. And then this goes as a wave. And of course, every little conversation around the kitchen table is maybe not that important, but it is the scale that matters. But you will never get the scale if you don't start with yourself. Yeah, so maybe this is the message. Thank you.
There is another question. I don't know if any of us are capable of answering this. It says, sustainable development relies heavily on a peaceful and coherent society. And if the so-called civilized, which is in all capital, world is at war for nonsensical issues, how will this be achieved? I really don't know the answer for this. Anybody?
If I may maybe continue a little bit, just one more thought, because this is, for example, very much related to the situation in the Ukraine. And I would say that these wars or these conflicts that we observe and that we try to solve or approach with, let's say, rational thinking, are not that nonsensical, I would say. And I'm not in favor of these conflicts, but there are pretty strong reasons for that conflicts, and they come from the, let's say, economic analysis of what's going on in the world. It's not happening by accident, and it's not nonsensical. If anything happens, then there are reasons behind it why it happens. And maybe this is another role that we as universities or academics or scholars have to play, should play. This is to somehow reveal or explain what are the true reasons, not those reasons that are given in the popular magazines or in the newspapers and in the internet at the very surface level, but what are the deep reasons of deep economic, very often economic reasons of what's going on in the world. And then once you start understanding this, you will see that these are not nonsensical, and then you will probably also start approaching these conflicts or these problems in a different way, and maybe you'll be more efficient in the solutions you propose. Thank you.
Very interesting viewpoint. There is a question for Professor Stacey Kennedy. You mentioned that your activity is activist in SDG implementation. What approach have you used? Top-down approach or a bottom-up design?
Thank you very much for that very important question. From our perspective, what really matters is having a distributed approach. So yes, top down and bottom up, but really distributing the ownership and the leadership at all levels. And so our university is keen to see and to promote, to encourage and to nurture scholar activists throughout the system. From the start, our own history as the university within the Caribbean, when we were established in 1948, it was in preparation for the independence of the region. So the former colonies being prepared and the university being that hub of knowledge, education, skills building, and paving the way for the future of this region. And so from the very start, we were set up with that developmental ethos, and our mission has always been to foster critical awareness and understanding around issues such as equity, inclusion, human rights, social justice, empowerment, social mobility. And therefore, having that commitment to being an activist university continues through our work to today. It's even more relevant given the issues before us on the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, and we are doing so in a proactive way through the work we do with our students, the efforts of our staff, our leadership, our community engagement projects, and of course our commitment to thought leadership on these very issues that will help the university to shape public policy and like our colleague Professor Rowland said, to also shape behavior and thinking, because it really starts with each and every one of us. And I fully support what he said, is that as a professional in higher education, we have to focus on our immediate sphere of influence. And through that, through those contacts and the influence there, we can then see the ripple effect permeating outwards into society. Each lecturer working with his or her students, each researcher working with his community of research collaborators, and so on. And that multiplier effect is really what will allow us to then see the shifting of thoughts, mindsets, and action. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Lianzhen, since you work a lot with community, there is a question from Nepal. Actually, I'm running high school where there are children of the age 13 to 18 years. Do you have any plan to start SDG to implement in this age group of students? If you have, please do share. We are very excited from Nepal.
Okay, excuse me, because I've been working in the higher education section for over 30 years. And so we are working with universities across the country, but we are not planning. It is not our plan to, work with high school kids or with high schools.
Thank you.
Sorry.
A question for Professor
Maybe
Barnabas.
here I could say something in actually, I think that one of the answers that we could also provide here is that the important work that He Lianzhen, for instance, is doing at higher education will trickle down to all the other levels of education, because through the higher education, we educate the teachers. We educate those who will be responsible for the teaching in all the other levels of education, from pre-primary to lifelong learning. And so in a way, maybe it is not direct impact on the other levels, but it certainly has a link to all of that. And then it also allows to see that if higher education is available to the many, what you called the kitchen table conversations, Roland, will be improved, because there will be an opportunity actually to talk about many other things that will allow to have the word travel even further. So the impacts are multiple. Once you have a solid, very well developed higher education system in its locality, in its own context, and I come back to your questions, Barnabas. I think that each and every university has its own role in its own locality, in its own context as well, given also all the different influences that are out there and that impact on the development of the kind of education that the institution is then able to provide. But all those who come through these institutions have a capacity to change the dialogue and the whole conversation around these topics. We need these strong institutions in order to educate well-rounded, very broad-based citizens who will be able to address the challenges that we face. I would have a question to all of us. We talk about the many challenges that we face. There are opportunities out there as well, and we also need to see how the universities have the opportunity to also maybe, I don't know if it's the right word, but how do we use this opportunity of education to also still, even in very difficult circumstances, instill some hope and future perspectives? Because that is also important, because we need to not give the impression to all those students coming to universities that there are only problems out there, but that they have a role to play, and that the role they will play can make the difference. And that comes back to what Roland also said earlier, forging these attitudes and teach them how they can act, and that action has an impact and is important. Maybe all of the speakers, you could say something about that as well.
Thank you so much. There is a question for Professor Barnabas from Boriana. She is asking how universities finance their UN SDG development, particularly in the area of digitalization of higher education. What ways can you deploy to collaborate with financial institutions providing new financial instruments?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, but I will attempt to answer. But let me also answer one answer one question that was in the chat and also the question raised by Hilgi. There was a question about conflict in Africa and whether we can at all achieve these SDGs. As I said, we must not give up as universities. We must play our role to ensure that these conflicts are reduced. Whenever I'm given an opportunity to speak at a forum where that is relevant, I just remind the people that, you know, we are so insignificant in this universe that we should be struggling to make sure that this earth survives than begin fighting among ourselves. And the conflicts that have been there in Uganda, the university has actually played a role through our Peace Center to resolve some of the conflicts. So it is possible. It is possible for universities to actually play a role in that. But the answer is yes, if conflicts continue, then all the gains that are made are all the time being erased. And we must all fight to make sure that we reduce these conflicts. Now, on the issue raised by Hilge, I think the question of mindset is very important. Right now, we are introducing a course of mindset change, even for our university students, working jointly with the professors from South Korea, who have had a very successful mindset program there. And therefore, we are inviting them and we are introducing that one here so that everybody knows they have to make a contribution. You cannot just say you have got this high education and you are going to look after yourself and your family only, but you have a responsibility to your community and to the whole of humanity. So mindset change education is extremely important. Now, on the question that you raise, moderator, what we have tried to do, because everybody was saying, you know, there is digital divide, Africa is we cannot afford this, we cannot afford that, but we have said no, but we are not going to continue complaining. Let us do what is possible within our means. And once we begin doing, then even the sky is a limit. Yeah? Even the sky is not a limit. And so we started discussing, as you have said, with these financial institutions. Right now, we have a financial institution in Uganda, which is providing laptops to students at a very low price and paying over a long period. So they just have to pay a small deposit and pay for a laptop over 3 years, which students would never dream of affording. Discussing with the service providers, zero rating our online platforms so that students don't have to look for data in order to access them. So it just needs a bit of innovation, and a lot of these things are possible.
Thank you. There's another question which says, it seems that people of the world have to apply the same development ideology, neoliberalism, where there are plenty of options for implementation of SDGs. How the SDGs will be achieved where countries have varied development context? The issue is critical in developing world context because much of the finance comes through aid, through carrot and stick approach. Could you all hear me or did I mute myself? I think I muted myself. This talks about SDGs implementing in the development context. The issue is critical in developing world because much of the finance comes through aids, through carrot and stick approaches. So what can be done? Anybody would like to take that question?
Yeah, maybe I can go for it. I would say, I'm not pretty sure if I understand it correctly, but what I would like to say is that these neoliberal policies that have been implemented all around the world for the last couple of decades, in my opinion at least, proved to be insufficient in securing the sustainable development, especially that they somehow promote free market approaches, and they promote this type of approaches that are focused on the easily measurable parameters, like, for example, GDP. In this context, I would say that that it's not enough. And those who felt this insufficiency of these approaches were especially these developing countries, where they, on the one hand, heard the story that the solution to everything, to all their problems, is just to open their markets and just to launch free market approach. But then after they exposed their economies and their societies to the global competition, they found themselves in a very difficult socio-economic position. That's at least my perspective. So even though there are some very important elements of this liberal approach to solving problems, and all this freedom and liberty somehow included in the neoliberal approaches as well, I believe that we should also try to somehow include other ways of thinking that were somehow suppressed in the previous decades, but nowadays they somehow rise again. But using this opportunity, I would like to maybe also somehow mix this answer with the answer to the question about the hope and future perspectives, because it somehow comes in pair. And I would like to share a little story about the program that we launched. This is a postgraduate program that we launched for the companies, actually, like one of the big corporations present at Polish market. And what we offered them, we said that, all right, you're doing CSR, corporate social responsibility programs, but we feel like you could do it more honestly. So we would like to teach you how to do it for real, not just to pretend, not just to show something, but just to do something real. And at least according to my perspective, I would say that in these type of corporations, they somehow do anything and then they celebrate it. So my favorite example is, for example, no printing day. Yeah, I'm not saying that it's not good, because of course it's good not to print, but it's not a solution to everything, right? So if a given corporation or a given company has its program which is focused on one non-printing day in a year, I would hazard a guess, that's not enough to save the planet. But they put a lot of effort to celebrate. According to some of the research that I checked, very often the budget earmarked for promotion of the CSR activities is up to 10 times higher than the budget of the very CSR activity, which shows something as well, right? So we launched this program and we have great students, actually. And during the first semester, we try to share with them some big picture of the world, like honest, real picture of the world. So how bad it really is. And after this, because this is a one-year program, one-year-long program. So after this first semester, they say, this is terrible. We didn't know that it's that bad. We thought that we are pretty close to reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. We thought that we are on a good path, and it's just enough what we do. And some of them were really emotionally devastated with what we are doing, what we were saying to them. But somehow we try to expose them to this real picture, because at least in my opinion, this is about being honest with ourselves, not fooling ourselves. This is somehow to touch the bottom and then start solving start doing things, but for real. And what we offered to them, in the second semester was a way in which we together constructed some genuine solutions, not like fake ones, not promotional ones, but let's say real solutions. I believe you know what I mean. And I would just like to finish with one more remark, because here in the chat, Felix Ofori wrote about the role of the critical thinking. And I believe that apart from what we've already said, this is one of the key elements that is needed here. So we need this critical thinking here in our approach to do things for real. That's my perspective. Thank you.
If I can come in here, Inakshi, just to follow on Roland's point, because I do think the whole question about rethinking development narratives is one that's very important. And just to share the experience, the lived experience from the Caribbean SIDS perspective, when it comes to the discussion or the discourse on neoliberal strategies for development, what we face as small island states is that GDP is woefully inadequate, because what we experience really is the multiple layers of vulnerability. And whenever we have hurricanes passing through the islands, we realize that what is captured does not reflect the setbacks, the enormity of the setbacks for generations in terms of trying to rebuild and recover from those extreme climatic events. And therefore, when development banks internationally use those criteria, it just glosses over the reality and the hardships and the need for real investments that are aligned to the realities of the people on the ground. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is that in many instances, small states are classified, because of their small populations, they tend to be classified as high middle income countries. That's what the reality for many of our states in the Caribbean. And therefore, we are denied access to concessional funding. And this, again, does not match the reality, because when we have disasters, and which has become the norm because of the climate, the change as a result of climate change, we are therefore excluded from the concessional financing. And then the types of aid that may come are tied aid, tied forms of financing. They come with some conditionalities, and therefore, again, not allowing for a true interaction and matching of the needs to the concessional forms of funding to allow for true indigenous development to flourish. Again, just to make the last point on how that corresponds to the climate justice agenda, which is something that we're also very active on as a university, we do have to be mindful that many of the small states that are marginally contributing to the climate crisis are the ones that are very much on the front line and are bearing the brunt, and therefore the need for open discussion and fair discussion around access to climate finance is something that is really important for Caribbean SIDS. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to mention a little bit about my country in India, where corporate social responsibility is mandatory by law. If your company is making a profit of more than 5 million, you need to pay 2% of that in as corporate social responsibility fund, or there are penalties to be followed. I would end the discussion on that note. I would hand it over to Dr. Helige. There are a lot of questions which I couldn't ask. The time is very limited, but the last note from you.
Thank you very much for the excellent moderation, and actually thank you to the speakers for the many ideas. I see we only started a conversation here. There's much more that we would wish to talk about, but I also saw in the diversity of your presentations how they complemented each other in saying that the leadership of university at the different levels of the institution are essential to advance on the issues that we are facing when it comes to Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. To pick up on Barnaba's statement, yes, we may not reach the goal set by 2030, but to plug in every citizen's mind that we have a role to play in transforming our world in order to hopefully develop a more sustainable one for the many to live in is of utmost importance. And I would like to thank you for the many examples you gave on how universities at all the different levels in their different missions, in teaching, in learning and research, in capacity building of the staff, in campus operations, and in the engagement with society and engagement with the world of work, or the world of the business world. The universities have a key role to play in all levels of society. And that is what we can see the next conversation around these topics to be elaborated on, for sure, together with HETL, together with many of the participants and those who shared their thoughts in the Q&A. This session forms part of a series of webinars that we started back in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic, to offer an opportunity for everyone around the world to come together and discuss the future of higher education. Because as well, as you said it, and maybe all of you in different forms and shapes, the pandemic has asked us to stop, think, and see how we want to move into the future. With reduced capacity, maybe, as some said that we are 15 years backwards, and we have to restart again to think about how we move from there into the future. But still, these conversations have taken place almost every week on different facets of higher education. The recordings are all available online and on the IAU YouTube channel. Feel free to use them, to abuse of them, to share them with your colleagues and to start conversations around them. They're all incredibly modern and active, and like you shared a lot of energy in this webinar, both the speakers and also the participants. And these conversations will also feed into the UNESCO World Higher Education Conference to take place in May, because we will feature these webinars there. The recordings will be made available to the broader and larger higher education community, way beyond the limits of institutions themselves and all around the world. So we hope that your conversations, your contributions will travel far. We will also look at the chat, take out of there all the resources that have been shared, and in the follow-up mail to all the participants, we will also try and share them again, so that you have those and you don't lose on the capacity to use them in your own work afterwards. So thank you to all. I know the conversation could have gone much further, and there's much more we would like to share. We will have other opportunities. We hope that you will join the conference of HETL soon, and there is also the IAU General Conference coming up in October in Dublin, if you're interested, and it will be on relevance and value of higher education for the future. So again, a topic that is linked to the discussions that we're having here. We will also continue our publication series, either the books, the HETL publication series, or the IAU publication series on the SDGs, providing for many examples on how universities engage with sustainable development at large beyond the SDGs, and also how they can play the role they should play in their societies, also to help foster peace in the minds of people for better futures, and also in our IAU Horizons series of publications. I would like to invite Isabel to open her camera. It's very important that she is also seen for the extraordinary work that she's been doing in preparing all this work, and also in helping us develop the work, for instance, in the IAU Global Cluster on HESD, bringing together so many excellent universities from everywhere around the world to work together towards a better future. And Stacey and Kennedy showed how UWI is leading on SDGs 13, but not only, also 14, liaising with 15 and 16. And we don't break down the SDGs in silos, as you've all demonstrated. They are connected, yet it is good to also show to the policymakers out there, universities matter, they have a lot to share, they can make the difference, help them to actually deliver on their promise. That's the very important part that we need to see for the future. So thank you again. Very grateful for your excellent presentations, and we hope to share the recording very soon.
Thank you, Helgi. Thanks a lot.
you.
It was a
Thank you so
wonderful.
much.
Everyone.
Really great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.